Whoa, look at you, the cleanup crew. Keep going, this is gold for the feed. Smile for the camera, old man. Look at you, scrubbing like a dog. Pathetic, everyone will see this. Still nothing to say?
You can't keep doing this. You're gonna kill yourself in here.
The mop bucket hit the mat with a crash that silenced the whole gym. Oops, Cole Braddock stood over the spreading water, grinning at his phone camera. Did I do that? My bad, mop boy. Laughter rippled through the crowd of fighters filming on their phones. Elijah Cross didn't look up. He set his mop against the wall, knelt, and began wringing water from his sleeve. Nothing to say? Cole crouched in front of him, camera still rolling. Cat got your tongue, old man? Or did they take that too, along with your hairline? I'll clean it, Elijah said quietly. That's it? That's all you got? Cole stood, laughing to his followers. Ladies and gentlemen, the bravest man in this gym, everybody. Across the room, Imani Rhodes stopped mid-stretch, jaw tight, eyes locked on Cole's back like she was memorizing it for later. Nobody in that gym knew what they were laughing at. Nobody knew what they were about to wake up. If you're watching this from your bed at midnight, your kitchen table with coffee going cold, or your car in a parking lot you're not ready to leave yet, comment your city below, because trust me, you are going to want to be here when this man remembers who he is. Hit subscribe before you go one line further, because this story does not slow down, and I am not waiting for you to catch up. The water spread across the blue mats in a slow, dark stain, and Elijah Cross worked in silence while the cameras kept rolling. He was 51 years old, though the gym paperwork listed him as 48, because he had learned a long time ago that the fewer numbers people had about you, the fewer stories they could build. He wore gray coveralls with Reed Facility Services stitched crooked over the pocket, because he'd sewn it on himself, and he had a way of moving through a room like he was trying not to be noticed by furniture. Imani noticed him. She always noticed him. She was 29, the gym's in-house physiotherapist, and she'd worked at Apex MMA long enough to know every fighter's tell, every trainer's temper, and exactly which ice packs went missing every Tuesday. She noticed that Elijah arrived before the sun most mornings, and left after the lights had already been cut. She noticed that when a heavy bag split at the seam, it came back the next day stitched tighter than the manufacturer had made it. She noticed that he never once, in the 8 months she'd worked there, raised his voice. She walked over now, crouched beside him without being asked, and started pulling paper towels from the dispenser. You don't have to do that, Elijah said. I know. She didn't stop. Braddock's going to say something. Braddock can choke on it, she said it lightly, but there was iron underneath, and Elijah glanced at her. Actually glanced, which he rarely did with anyone, like he was recalibrating something. You'll get in trouble. I'm a physiotherapist, Elijah. Half my job is cleaning up messes men like him make of their own bodies. This isn't so different. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't ask for anything back, which was rare enough that he almost forgot to look away. Thank you, he said. Just that. But he meant it the way a man means something he hasn't said in a long time. You're welcome. She stood, brushed her knees off, and before she walked away, she added, You've got a corner of your sleeve still wet. You're going to smell like chlorine all day. I don't mind. I know you don't. That's kind of the problem with you. She said it over her shoulder, already walking, and Elijah stood there a second longer than the moment required, watching her go, before he picked the mop back up. The next morning, before the sun had cleared the rooftops, Elijah was already at the equipment wall, running his thumb along the seam of a torn heavy bag that had been condemned by the supply company 2 weeks earlier. He'd restitched it with waxed thread and a sailmaker's needle he kept in his own toolbox, using a cross-stitch pattern that would outlast the leather itself. "That's not gym issue thread," said Coach Denny Okafor. "No, that name's wrong. Strike it," said the head coach, a stocky man named Rollins who'd been running Apex for 11 years and had learned to trust his gut over his eyes. He picked up the bag, turned it over. "This stitch pattern. Where'd you learn this?" "Around," Elijah said. "Around where?" Elijah didn't answer, and Rollins, who'd spent 2 decades reading men who didn't want to be read, let it go. But he didn't forget it. He watched Elijah wrap a young fighter's hands that afternoon, watched the way his fingers moved, tight figure eights around the knuckles, a rap style Rollins had only ever seen once before, on a documentary about special operations medics. "Where'd you learn to wrap hands like that?" Rollins asked. "Somebody taught me once," Elijah said, "a long time ago. Must have been a good teacher." He was. That afternoon, a 19-year-old amateur fighter named Dorian sat on the bench with his shoulder wrapped in ice, wincing every time he tried to raise his arm above his ribs. The team doctor hadn't looked at him yet. Elijah walked past, paused, and without a word, pressed 2 fingers gently into the front of Dorian's shoulder. Dorian yelped. "Anterior instability," Elijah said. "Not a tear. You've been overcompensating with your trapezius for probably 3 weeks now, which is why your neck's been tight too." Dorian stared at him. "How did you—" "The doctor hasn't even looked at it yet." "I've seen it before," Elijah said, and went back to sweeping. Imani, watching from the physio table across the room, allowed herself a small, private smile, the kind she didn't let anyone catch. A few days later, Dorian found Elijah alone in the equipment room after hours, restringing a speed bag platform. "Can I ask you something?" Dorian said. "You can ask. Everyone says you used to be somebody. Like, somebody. Dorian shifted his weight. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I've been losing every fight this year, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and nobody here actually watches me. They watch the guys who are already good." Elijah set down his tools. He studied the kid for a long moment, long enough that Dorian started to think he wasn't going to answer at all. "Your right foot," Elijah finally said. "When you throw your cross, it turns out before your hip does. That's why you're getting countered. Fix the foot, the power follows. Everything else is noise." "That's it?" "That's it. Most of fighting is just noise pretending to be complicated." Elijah picked his tools back up. "Come in early tomorrow." Before the others. Dorian came in early the next morning, and the one after that, and within 2 weeks he won a fight he was supposed to lose by knockout, and won it by knockout himself in the second round, with a right cross that his opponent never saw turn. People asked him how. Dorian only smiled and said, "I've been seeing a teacher." Nobody asked which one. Nobody thought to look at the man with the mop. Except Rollins. Rollins kept looking. He watched Elijah's hands one evening, watched the raised white line across 2 knuckles, the small circular scar just above his wrist that Rollins recognized from exactly one other place in his life, a documentary he'd watched on his father's old television about a war nobody talked about anymore. Impossible, Rollins murmured to himself, and didn't say anything to anyone, because some thoughts are too heavy to hand to another person before you're sure. That evening, Imani found Elijah locking up the equipment room, the gym empty and dim around them, the only sound the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. "Can I walk out with you?" she asked. "You don't need my permission for that." "I know. I'm asking anyway." She fell into step beside him, and for a while, neither of them said anything, which he found he didn't mind, because most silences with her didn't feel like waiting for something. They felt like just being somewhere together. "You've got a way of disappearing in a room full of people," she said finally. "I've been watching you do it for months. It's like you've practiced it." "Some people are loud to be seen," Elijah said. "I learned it's safer to be quiet." "Safer from what?" He didn't answer right away. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, moths circling in slow orbits. "From people wanting things from you," he said eventually. "Once they know what you can do, they stop seeing you and start seeing what you're useful for." Imani stopped walking. He stopped too, a step ahead of her, and turned. "I don't want anything from you, Elijah." Her voice was soft, but it landed like something solid. "I just like talking to you. That's all this is. That's all it's ever been." He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look a man gives when he's trying to decide if it's safe to believe something good. "Nobody's said that to me in a long time," he admitted. "Then I'm saying it now," she smiled, small and certain. "Good night, Elijah." "Good night, Imani." He watched her taillights pull out of the lot before he let himself smile too, alone, in the dark, like a man unlearning something slowly. If this story already has your chest a little tight, that's exactly where it's supposed to be. So type "I'm watching" in the comments and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from tonight. Smash that subscribe button now, because what's coming for Cole Braddock is going to need witnesses, and I want you here. A retired UFC Hall of Famer named Reggie Vance walked into Apex MMA on a Thursday afternoon to scout new talent for a promotional event. He shook hands with Rollins, posed for photos with a few fighters, laughed at Cole's jokes because that's what you did with reigning champions. Then he turned toward the equipment wall, mid-sentence, and stopped so completely that the coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He was staring at Elijah, who was on one knee, coiling a jump rope. "That's not possible," Reggie whispered. "Reggie?" Rollins frowned. "You good?" Reggie didn't answer. He walked slowly across the gym, past fighters who parted without knowing why, until he stood directly in front of Elijah, who had gone very still. "The Phantom," Reggie said, barely above a breath. "You're the Phantom." The gym went quiet in ripples, conversation dying as people turned to look, phones lowering. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elijah said evenly, but his hands had stopped moving. "I trained with men who trained with you," Reggie said, voice shaking now. "Nobody ever saw your face. Nobody knew your name. You beat guys nobody else could touch, and then you just vanished. They said you were dead. Some people said prison. Somebody told me you were killed overseas. People say a lot of things. Your hands." Reggie's eyes dropped to the scars, the same ones Rollins had noticed weeks ago. "I've seen photos. Grainy, old, but I've seen them. That scar above your wrist, I'd know it anywhere." Cole, who had been recording a promo video by the cage, wandered over with his phone still up, sensing content. "What's going on?" "Who's dead?" "Nobody," Elijah said, standing, brushing off his knees. "This is a misunderstanding." The Phantom isn't a misunderstanding, Reggie said. The Phantom is a legend, and you're standing here in a janitor's uniform. Cole laughed, loud, delighted. Wait, this guy? Mop Boy is somebody's legend? Reggie, my man, I think the fumes finally got you. Reggie turned on him, sharp. You don't understand what you're looking at. I'm looking at a janitor, Cole said, still grinning for the camera. A guy who cleans up water and wraps hands. That's who I'm looking at. Elijah said nothing. He picked his mop back up and walked away, and the silence that followed him across the gym floor was louder than anything Cole had said all day. That night, after everyone had gone, Rollins found Elijah in the storage room and shut the door behind him. I'm not going to pretend I don't know, Rollins said. I've known for weeks. I just didn't want to say it out loud because saying it out loud makes it real, and real means questions. Elijah sat on an overturned crate, elbows on his knees. Ask your questions, Rollins. Just one. Why here? Why a mop? After everything you must have done. Elijah was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone somewhere far away. I had a younger brother, Terrence. The name cracked slightly in his mouth, like something not used in years. He wanted to be exactly like me. I never wanted that for him. I tried to keep him out of it, out of the fighting, the world I came from. But he watched me for years and decided that was the man he wanted to be. Elijah pressed his palms together. He started fighting underground circuits behind my back. I found out too late. One night, he didn't come home. He never came home again. Elijah. I stopped fighting that week. I stopped everything. I buried the Phantom in the ground next to him, because I decided the world didn't need another person built the way we were built. It just needed one less. He looked up at Rollins, and there was nothing performed in his face, nothing hidden. A mop doesn't ask anything of me it can't handle. That's why here. Rollins didn't say anything for a moment. Then he put a hand on Elijah's shoulder, briefly, and left the room without another word. Because some grief doesn't need company, just witness. Later that night, Imani was waiting by his car. Rollins told me, she said quietly. Not everything, just enough. Elijah stopped a few feet from her, tired in a way that had nothing to do with his body. I suppose everyone knows now. Not everyone, just people who care enough to ask the right questions. She stepped closer. Elijah, I'm not scared of who you were. And I'm not impressed by it either, if that's what you're worried about. I like who you are, with a mop in your hand, just as much as I'd like who you are with anything else in it. That never changed for me. His throat worked before he spoke. Terrence would have liked you. Tell me about him sometime. When you're ready, not tonight. Not tonight, he agreed. She reached out and took his hand, just held it, right there in the parking lot, under the buzzing lights, and he let her. And for the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't something he was hiding inside of. It was something he was simply sharing. A few days later, Cole found a locker that hadn't been opened in what looked like a decade, shoved behind stacked mats in the back storage room. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag gone brittle with age, was a photograph. Two young men in fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning like the world hadn't gotten to them yet. Beneath it, a small velvet box holding two military medals. Cole held the photo up, laughing to the small crowd that had gathered. Look at this. Mop Boy's got a whole scrapbook back here. Put it down, Rollins said sharply. Cole ignored him, tossing the photo onto the floor, grinding his heel over the corner of it. just to see what would happen, just because he could. What happened was Elijah walked in. He saw the photo under Cole's boot. He saw his brother's face, 22 years old forever, pressed into gym floor grit. Something in his expression changed, not anger exactly, something colder and older than anger, something that made three grown fighters standing nearby take a step back without meaning to. "Pick it up," Elijah said. His voice hadn't risen at all. That was somehow worse. Cole smirked, sensing an audience, sensing content. "Make me, old man." Elijah didn't move toward him. He crossed the room slowly, knelt, and picked the photograph up himself, brushing the dust from Terrence's face with his thumb. Careful, the way you'd touch something that could still bruise. "Tomorrow," Elijah said, standing, looking directly at Cole for the first time since the mop bucket. "You and me. In the cage, tomorrow morning." The room went utterly silent. Cole laughed, but it came out thinner than he meant it to. "You're joking." "I don't joke," Elijah said, and walked out, the photograph held against his chest, like something he'd carry for the rest of his life. If your heart is pounding right now, the way mine was the first time I heard this story, don't scroll past this part. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me if you think Cole Braddock has any idea what's about to happen to him tomorrow morning. Subscribe now, because the fight you've been waiting for since the very first scene is only minutes away. And trust me, it is worth every second you've spent getting here. Word spread through Apex MMA overnight, the way fire spreads through dry brush. Fast, uncontained, unstoppable. By 6 the next morning, the gym was packed wall to wall. Fighters who didn't even train there anymore, showing up, because somebody's cousin's coach had texted somebody's training partner that the janitor was fighting the champion. Phones were already up before the lights had fully come on. Rollins stood by the cage door, looking like a man watching a storm he couldn't stop, and didn't particularly want to. Cole arrived in full gear, gloves already laced, grinning for his growing audience, cracking his neck side to side. "This is going to be the easiest content I ever make," he told his camera. "Watch this." Elijah arrived in plain gray training shorts and a faded t-shirt, no branding, no gloves yet, walking through the crowd the way he'd walked through it for 8 months, quiet, unhurried, like the noise around him belonged to someone else's life. But when he pulled his shirt off to change into his rash guard, the gym went still. Scars crossed his ribs in 3 places. A puckered mark on his shoulder that could only have come from a bullet. Faded ink on his forearm. Coordinates, not decoration. The kind of tattoo men get to remember exact places they never wanted to forget. His body didn't look 51. It looked like it had been built for exactly one purpose a long time ago, and had never fully put that purpose down. "He's still in shape," someone near the cage whispered. "Look at him." Imani stood at the edge of the mats, arms crossed tight over her chest, not to hide fear, but to hold herself together, because watching him walk toward that cage felt like watching someone step back into a version of himself she'd only heard about in fragments. He caught her eye before he ducked through the cage door. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She pressed her fist lightly against her own chest, a small, private gesture, and he nodded once and stepped inside. "Rules are simple," Rollins called out, voice tight. "Tap or knockout, nothing else. And somebody call it if it goes too far." Cole bounced on his toes, grinning at the crowd. "Let's give the people a show, old man." The bell, an actual gym bell someone had grabbed from the front desk, rang, and Cole exploded forward immediately, throwing a combination meant to end things fast, meant to be over before anyone's phone even finished loading the live stream. Nothing landed. Elijah moved half a step, shoulder rolling a punch that should have caught his jaw, weight shifting so smoothly it looked less like defense and more like the punch had simply chosen to miss. Cole swung again, harder, and again found only air where a man's face should have been. "Stand still!" Cole shouted, frustration cracking through the showmanship. "I am standing still," Elijah said quietly. "You're just not hitting where I am." The crowd, which had come for a joke, went dead silent, then slowly began to lean forward, phones forgotten in hands, because what they were watching had stopped being funny somewhere in the last 30 seconds. Cole came again, wilder now, telegraphing everything, and Elijah slipped a hook, caught his wrist, redirected the momentum with almost no visible effort, and Cole stumbled past him into open mat, catching himself before he fell. "You're chasing knockouts," Elijah said, voice never rising above conversation level. "Slow down." "Shut up," Cole snapped, turning, breathing harder than a man his age and conditioning should have been after 30 seconds. "Shut up and fight." "I am fighting," Elijah said. "You're just not used to what it looks like when someone isn't trying to impress anybody." The gym had gone completely silent now, except for breathing and footfalls, the earlier laughter long gone, replaced by something closer to reverence. Rollins stood frozen at the cage door, hand over his mouth. Reggie Vance, near the front, whispered to no one in particular, "I forgot what this looked like." I forgot what it actually looked like. Cole threw a desperate right hand, all power, no plan, and Elijah stepped inside it instead of away, closing distance the way boxers fear most, and suddenly Cole was off balance, weight compromised, and Elijah's arm was already around his neck before Cole understood he'd been swept. "Tap," Elijah said quietly, "or don't, but you're not getting out of this one." Cole struggled for 3 seconds, 4, the crowd holding its breath collectively, and then his hand slapped against Elijah's forearm, twice, fast. Elijah released him instantly, the second the tap landed, no hesitation, no lingering. He caught Cole under the arm as the younger man swayed, steadying him, helping him find his feet. There was no celebration, no raised fist, no roar to the crowd. Elijah simply stepped back, breathing evenly, and looked at Cole with something that wasn't triumph at all. It looked almost like sadness. The gym exploded, not in laughter this time, but in something closer to disbelief turning into awe. Phones held high, capturing a moment everyone in that room understood, without being told, that they would be talking about for years. Cole sat down hard on the mat, chest heaving, staring up at the man he'd humiliated with a mop bucket 3 weeks earlier. His face had gone through several expressions in the last 10 seconds. Shock, denial, something that looked almost like fear, and finally settled into something smaller and more honest than anything he'd shown on camera in years. "Why?" Cole managed. "Why did you let me tap out so easy?" "I don't fight to hurt people," Elijah said. "I never did. I fight because sometimes it's the only language certain people understand until they're ready to learn a better one." If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't over yet. The real answer is still coming. So comment the word instructor below if you have a feeling about what's about to walk through that gym door. And don't you dare unsubscribe before you see it, because the best part of this story hasn't even started. The gym had barely settled, fighters still murmuring, phones still up, Cole still sitting on the mat, catching his breath, when the front doors opened and a man in a pressed dark uniform walked in, medals catching the overhead lights, posture so straight it looked like it had been carved rather than trained. Conversation died instantly. He walked directly across the gym floor, past Rollins, past Reggie, past Cole still sitting on the mat, and stopped in front of Elijah. Then, in front of the entire room, in front of every phone still recording, he snapped to attention and saluted. Not casually, formally, the way a soldier salutes someone whose rank has never expired, no matter how many years have passed since either of them wore a uniform. "Instructor," the man said, voice carrying to every corner of the silent gym. Elijah's jaw tightened. "General Hale." "This man," the general said, turning to address the room, voice steady and clear. "Trained soldiers who came home when the mission said they shouldn't have. I am one of them. There are men standing in hospitals right now, men holding their children, men who buried their fathers instead of the other way around, because of what this man taught them in rooms nobody was ever supposed to know about." He looked back at Elijah, and something in his composed face cracked. Just slightly, just human. "The world called you the Phantom. We called you something better. We called you instructor. And I have spent 6 years trying to find you to say thank you before it was too late to say it." Nobody in the gym moved. Cole, still sitting on the mat, stared up at Elijah like he was seeing him. Actually seeing him, for the first time since the mop bucket, since the water, since the word "mop boy" had left his mouth like it cost him nothing. Imani stood at the edge of the crowd, tears she wasn't bothering to hide slipping down her face, one hand pressed flat against her chest, watching the man she'd been quietly falling for get handed back a piece of himself he'd buried on purpose. "Why now?" Elijah asked quietly, and for the first time all morning his voice wavered. "Why come now, after all this time?" "Because somebody sent me a video last night," General Hale said, "of a man refusing to hit back when he was humiliated in front of a room full of people filming him. And I recognized the stillness before I recognized the face. Nobody moves like that unless somebody like you taught them how not to." The gym stood in silence for a long moment, the kind that isn't empty, the kind that's full of something too big to interrupt. Then Cole stood, slowly, and walked across the mat, stopping in front of Elijah with none of the swagger he'd walked in with 3 weeks ago, none of the performance, just a young man who suddenly understood how small he'd made himself look, trying to make someone else look small. "I posted something last night," Cole said quietly, "before any of this. An apology. Not because I lost, because I forgot what it looks like to respect somebody who never asked for respect in the first place." He swallowed hard. "Will you train me? For real this time. Not the version of me that films everything, the version that actually wants to learn." Elijah studied him for a long moment, the same look he'd given Imani weeks ago, the look of a man deciding whether it was safe to believe something could still change. "On one condition," Elijah said finally. "Anything. Tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock, bring a mop." Cole blinked, then, unbelievably, laughed. A real laugh, small and surprised out of him. "Yes, sir." That evening, once the gym had emptied and the story had already begun spreading across every phone in the building, Imani found Elijah sitting alone on the front steps, the photograph of him and Terrence resting carefully in his hands. She sat down beside him without asking. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I don't know yet. he admitted. I spent a long time making sure nobody ever looked at me again. And today, everybody looked. How does it feel? He was quiet for a while, turning the photograph gently in his fingers. Lighter, he finally said, surprised by his own answer. I thought it would feel like losing something. It feels more like I finally put something down I'd been carrying too long. Imani leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let her, and neither of them said anything else for a long while, because some evenings don't need more words than that. Terrence would have liked today, Elijah said eventually, quiet, almost to himself. I think he'd have liked you finding someone too, Imani said, if you don't mind me saying that. Elijah turned his head, looked at her properly, the porch light soft on her face. I don't mind at all. Good, she said, smiling, because I wasn't planning on going anywhere. He reached over, careful, like he was still relearning how to reach for things, and took her hand, and this time, neither of them let go. The next morning, at 5 o'clock exactly, the gym doors opened before the sun had cleared the rooftops. Cole Braddock walked in wearing sweats instead of sponsor gear, carrying a mop he'd bought himself the night before because he didn't want to use Elijah's. Elijah was already there, sleeves rolled up, water bucket at his feet. Ready? Elijah asked. Ready, Cole said. And for the first time since anyone at Apex MMA had known him, he meant it without an audience to perform it for. They worked in silence for a while, mopping side by side. No cameras, no crowd. Nothing but the quiet scrape of mop against mat, and the early light coming gold through the front windows. Can I ask you something? Cole said eventually. You can ask. That day, with the bucket, why didn't you ever get mad? Not even once. I was trying to get a reaction out of you for weeks. Elijah considered the question the way he considered most things, slowly, honestly. Anger is loud, he said, and loud things get noticed by people who don't deserve to see what's real. I decided a long time ago I'd rather be underestimated by everybody than understood by the wrong ones. Cole nodded slowly, absorbing that in a way he clearly hadn't absorbed much of anything before. I want to be better than I was, not just at fighting, at all of it. Then you already started, Elijah said. Most people never get that far. Later that morning, Imani arrived to find them both still mopping, laughing quietly about something neither of them would later remember the words to, and she stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, thinking about how strange and quiet true strength actually looked once you finally saw it up close. Not loud, not cruel, not performing for anyone. Just a man, a mop, and a piece he'd earned the hard way, finally letting himself be seen by the people who deserved to see him. Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove how strong they are. The strongest ones never have to. They just keep showing up, keep being kind when it costs them something, keep choosing quiet over cruelty, and eventually, the world catches up to who they always were. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me writing it, that's exactly why this channel exists. So hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest, whether it was the salute, the fight, or the mop. And like this video before you go, so more people can find their way to Elijah's story too. I'll see you in the next one. Same time, same place, another story worth staying for.